The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers as my phone buzzed against the concrete floor of my auto shop. I'd been working late on Mrs. Henderson's ancient Buick, trying to coax another year out of her transmission. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the tools scattered around my workbench. I wiped my hands on an old rag and picked up the phone. The message was from Vara, my wife of 18 years. I'm a free person, and I decide whether I come home tonight or not. Don't call me until tomorrow. I stared at the screen for a long moment. The words seemed to float there, disconnected from reality. Free person. As if marriage was some kind of prison she'd been trapped in. As if I was her warden instead of her husband. My thumbs moved across the screen before my brain caught up. I'm not your husband anymore. Don't come back home. I hit send and placed the phone face down on my workbench. The shop fell silent except for the distant hum of traffic on Route 12 and the tick of cooling metal from the Buick's engine. Zane Merrinor, 38 years old, owner of Merrinor Auto Repair in South Shore, Michigan. That's who I was. Or had been, anyway. Now I wasn't sure what I was. I locked up the shop and drove home through the quiet streets of our neighborhood. The duplex we rented sat on Maple Street, half-renovated like most of my dreams. I'd started updating the kitchen 2 years ago. Then work got busy. Then Vara got promoted to senior associate at Brennan & Associates. And somehow the cabinet doors never got hung. Inside, I went straight to the desk in our bedroom. The marriage certificate sat in the top drawer, yellowed at the edges. Underneath it, our lease agreement and the debit card for our joint account. I pulled out my laptop and logged into the bank. Our checking account showed $12,147. My paycheck from last week, her salary from the law firm, and the small emergency fund we'd been building. I transferred $6,123 to my personal account, exactly half. Then I called the bank's automated line and requested a freeze on the joint account pending separation. Next, I opened my email and typed a message to our landlord, Frank Kowalski. Frank had been renting to us for 5 years, ever since we moved back to South Shore from Detroit. Frank, this is to notify you that Vara and I are separating. Please remove my name from the lease effective immediately. She'll be responsible for rent going forward. Thanks, Zane. I hit send and moved to the closet. Vara's clothes hung in neat rows, her work suits, weekend jeans, the red dress she wore to office parties. I pulled everything off hangers and folded them into garbage bags. Her shoes went into cardboard boxes I found in the basement. Jewelry, makeup, books, everything that belonged to her. As I packed, my mind wandered to the signs I'd ignored. The late nights at the office that started 6 months ago. The way she'd started dressing differently, wearing perfume to work. How she'd moved her phone charger to her side of the bed and started sleeping with it under her pillow. The way she'd stopped looking at me when she talked. I carried the bags to the front door and stacked them neatly. Then I drove to the hardware store on Main Street. Jerry Kowalski, Frank's nephew, worked the night shift. Hey, Zane, little late for a hardware run, isn't it? Need to change my locks. Tonight. Jerry raised an eyebrow, but didn't ask questions. Small towns teach you when to mind your own business. He sold me a new deadbolt and knob set, and I drove back home. Changing locks isn't complicated when you've spent 20 years working with your hands. 30 minutes later, I had new keys and the old locks in a bag destined for the trash. I kept the receipt, everything documented, everything legal. Back inside, I printed divorce papers from a legal website. Michigan was a no-fault state, which made things simpler, irreconcilable differences. I signed my name with a black pen and left the papers on the kitchen table where she'd see them first thing. My phone had been buzzing intermittently while I worked, but I'd ignored it. Now I picked it up and saw 17 missed calls from Vara. 17. The calls had started 23 minutes after I sent my reply. I forwarded the divorce papers to her email address. Then I sent copies to her parents in Lansing. No message, no explanation, just the legal documents that would speak for themselves. The house felt different now. quieter, emptier, but also cleaner somehow. Like I'd finally thrown out something that had been rotting in the refrigerator for months. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat in my recliner. The TV remote sat on the coffee table next to a magazine Vara had been reading, some glossy thing about successful women in business. I left it there. Not my problem anymore. My phone rang again. Vara's name flashed on the screen. I declined the call and turned the phone to silent. Outside, Mrs. Clemens' porch light came on. She was probably wondering about all the activity. By tomorrow, the whole neighborhood would know something was up. Let them wonder. Let them talk. I'd spent 18 years trying to be the husband Vara wanted, the man who could match her ambitions and social climbing. Tonight, I was done pretending. I finished my whiskey and went to bed, alone. I woke to pounding on the front door. The clock read 12:47 a.m. Through the bedroom window, I could see Vara's silver Accord in the driveway, driver's door open, headlights still on. The pounding continued, followed by the sound of a key trying to work in a lock that no longer recognized it. Then more pounding. "Zane, open this door right now!" I pulled on jeans and a t-shirt but didn't rush. Let her wait. Let her understand what it felt like to be locked out. "Zane, I know you're in there. We need to talk." I walked to the front door and spoke through the wood. "Nothing to talk about. Your stuff is in the bags by the door. You can't just change the locks. I live here too." "Not anymore. Check your email." "This is insane. You're having some kind of breakdown." I slid the divorce papers under the door. "Read those. Everything's legal and documented. You wanted to be free. Congratulations." "Zane, please, let me in. We can work this out." Her voice had changed. Less demanding, more pleading. But it was too late for that. 6 months too late. "Work what out, Vara? Your late nights? Your new perfume? The way you've been treating me like I'm some embarrassment you can't wait to get rid of?" Silence on the other side of the door. "I saw the credit card bills," I continued. "Dinners at restaurants we never went to. Hotel charges when you were supposedly working late. You think I'm stupid?" "It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. And now you're free to do whatever you want, with whoever you want. Just not in my house." I turned off the porch light and walked back to the bedroom. She pounded on the door a few more times. Then I heard her car door slam and the engine start. Gravel crunched as she backed out of the driveway. My phone showed 43 missed calls. I turned it off and went back to sleep. Morning came gray and drizzling, typical for October in Michigan. I made coffee and scrambled eggs, eating breakfast in the kitchen that suddenly felt too big. The divorce papers were gone from the table. She'd taken them when she collected her bags. My phone had 67 missed calls and 23 text messages. I deleted them all without reading them and drove to the shop. South Shore had been a thriving auto town back when the big three were actually big. Now it was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, and most of that business involved trying to keep old cars running long enough to afford newer old cars. My shop sat on the corner of Main and 3rd, a concrete block building with 2 service bays and an office that doubled as a waiting room. I'd bought it 8 years ago with money inherited from my father, back when Vara still believed in my potential. Tommy Kowalski, Jerry's younger brother, was already there when I arrived, changing oil in a Ford pickup that had seen better decades. "Morning, boss. You look like you got hit by a truck." Something like that. Tommy was 22, fresh out of technical school and eager to learn. He reminded me of myself at that age, before life taught me that good intentions don't always lead to good outcomes. "Mrs. Patterson called about her Civic," he said, making that grinding noise again. "Probably the brake pads. Tell her to bring it in this afternoon." I spent the morning working on Mrs. Henderson's Buick, losing myself in the familiar rhythm of mechanical problem solving. Cars were honest. When something was broken, you could see it, fix it, make it right again. People were more complicated. Around noon, my sister Julie called. She lived in Grand Rapids with her husband and twin boys, far enough away to avoid most of the local drama, but close enough to hear about it eventually. Frank Kowalski called Dave, she said without preamble. Dave was her husband, a contractor who'd done work for Frank. Said you and Vara are splitting up. What happened? She decided she was a free person. I decided to help her with that. Zane, what does that mean? I told her about the text, the locks, the divorce papers. Julie listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her. Jesus, she said finally. Are you okay? I'm fine. No, you're not. Nobody's fine after 18 years of marriage ends in one night. It didn't end in one night, Julie. It ended months ago. Last night I just made it official. Have you talked to a lawyer? Don't need one. No kids, no shared property except the shop, and that's mine. Michigan's no fault anyway. What about the house? It's a rental. She can keep it if she wants. I'll find somewhere else. Julie was quiet for a moment. You want to come stay with us for a while? The boys would love to see their uncle. Thanks, but I'm good. Got work to do. After I hung up, I realized I meant it. For the first time in months, I had work to do that actually mattered. Cars to fix, customers to help, a business to run. Simple, honest work that didn't require me to pretend to be someone I wasn't. Tommy knocked on the office door around 3. Boss? There's a lady here to see you. Says she's your wife. Through the window, I could see Vara's car in the parking lot. She was sitting behind the wheel, phone pressed to her ear. Even from 50 feet away, I could see she was crying. Tell her I'm busy. She says it's important. Everything's important to Vara. Tell her to call her lawyer. Tommy looked uncomfortable but nodded and walked back to the service bay. A few minutes later, Vara appeared in the office doorway. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wasn't wearing makeup. I hadn't seen her look this unpolished in years. We need to talk. No, we don't. Zane, please. 5 minutes. I leaned back in my chair and crossed my arms. Clock's ticking. She sat down across from my desk, the same chair where customers sat when I explained why their repairs would cost more than their cars were worth. I made a mistake. You made several mistakes. Which one are we talking about? I know you're angry. I'm not angry, Vara. Angry would mean I still cared enough to be emotional about this. I'm done. You don't mean that. I changed the locks, filed for divorce, moved the money. What part of that seems like I don't mean it? She started crying again, the kind of careful tears that didn't smear mascara, except she wasn't wearing any mascara, which made the tears seem almost genuine. I never meant for this to happen, she said. It got complicated. Complicated. I tasted the word. Is that what we're calling it? There's someone else. I know. You know? Hotel charges, Vara. Dinners for 2 at restaurants I can't afford. You coming home smelling like cologne that isn't mine. I'm not a detective, but I'm not blind either. She looked down at her hands. His name is Richard Vance. Richie. We went to high school together. Richie Vance. The name clicked. Slick Richie from the football team? The one who got arrested for selling pot behind the gymnasium? He's different now. He's a real estate developer. I almost laughed. A real estate developer, in South Shore. That's like being a ship captain in the desert. He flips houses, makes good money. And you think he's going to take care of you the way I did? It's not about money. It's always about money with you, Vara. Everything is. My shop isn't prestigious enough. This house isn't nice enough. I'm not successful enough. Well, now you can find out what success looks like with Slick Richie. That's not fair. Fair? I stood up. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been telling me you were unhappy instead of sneaking around for 6 months. Fair would have been asking for a divorce instead of texting me like I was some guy you met at a bar. Fair would have been treating me like a human being instead of an obstacle to your happiness. I was scared. Of what? Of me? Of talking to your husband about your marriage? Of hurting you. Well, mission accomplished. Now get out of my shop. She stood up slowly, like her joints hurt. The house, keep it. I'll find somewhere else. What about our things? The furniture, Take whatever you want. I don't need reminders. She walked to the door, then turned back. Zane, I really am sorry. I know you are. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry it's messy. You're sorry you have to deal with consequences. But you're not sorry you did it. If you were, you wouldn't have done it in the first place. After she left, I sat in my office and stared out the window at the empty parking lot. Tommy poked his head in around 5. You okay, boss? I'm fine. Lock up when you're done with the Ford. You sure? You want to grab a beer or something? Thanks, but I'm good. I wasn't good, but I wasn't broken either. I was something else. Something harder and cleaner than I'd been that morning. Something free. I spent the next week living in a motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where the carpet had seen better decades and the ice machine worked sporadically. It wasn't comfortable, but it was temporary, and temporary felt right. During the day, I worked on cars and tried not to think about the empty duplex on Maple Street. During the evening, I looked at apartments and small houses for rent. South Shore wasn't exactly a seller's market, so I had options. The gossip started on Wednesday. Mrs. Patterson brought her Civic in for brake work and spent 20 minutes fishing for information about my situation. By Friday, half the town knew Vara and I were splitting up, and the other half had theories about why. Heard she was stepping out with Richie Vance, said Bob Muller, who owned the hardware store. That boy's been trouble since high school. Always thought she was too good for her own good, added his wife, Carol. No offense, Zane. I didn't take offense. Carol Muller had been saying the same thing about Vara for years, just not to my face. The truth was, I felt lighter. Not happy exactly, but relieved. Like I'd been holding my breath for months and could finally exhale. On Saturday morning, I found a house. It was a small ranch on Oak Street, 3 blocks from the shop. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a garage big enough for my truck, and some tools. The rent was reasonable, and the landlord didn't ask questions about my recent divorce. Place has been empty for 6 months, said Mr. Henley, the owner. Previous tenant was an old lady who kept it nice. You seem like good people. I signed a lease and gave him first month's rent plus deposit. Cash from my personal account that Vara couldn't touch. Moving was simple since I didn't have much to move. Clothes, tools, my father's old recliner, a few boxes of books and papers. Everything else belonged to the life I'd shared with Vara, and I didn't want it anymore. Tommy helped me load the truck on Sunday morning. He didn't ask questions, just showed up with work gloves and a thermos of coffee. This is nice, he said, looking around the empty house. Good neighborhood. It's quiet. Quiet's good. We unloaded everything in 2 trips. I gave Tommy $50 for his help, and he tried to refuse it. Keep it, I said. Buy your girlfriend dinner. How'd you know I had a girlfriend? You've been whistling for 3 weeks. Either you're in love, or you've lost your mind. He grinned and pocketed the money. That evening, I sat in my father's recliner in my new living room and ate Chinese takeout from the container. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of kids playing in someone's backyard. My phone rang. Julie. Dave drove by the old place, she said. Saw a moving truck. You didn't tell me you found somewhere. Just moved in today. How is it? It's mine. That's good. That's really good, Zane. How are the boys? Driving me crazy. Jake lost his retainer and Josh decided he wants to play drums. I'm thinking about running away to Mexico. Mexico's nice this time of year. Come visit next weekend. I'll make pot roast. Maybe. After we hung up, I walked through the house, turning on lights in each room. The bedrooms were empty except for my clothes hanging in the master closet. The second bedroom would make a good office, or maybe a workshop for small projects. The kitchen had old appliances but good bones. I could update it over time if I decided to stay. The bathroom needed new fixtures, and the living room could use paint, but those were projects, not problems. I'd spent 2 years trying to renovate the duplex for Vara, trying to make it into something that would impress her friends and colleagues. This house I could fix for myself, the way I wanted it. Monday morning brought the first real test. Vara's car pulled into the shop parking lot just as I was opening up. She sat behind the wheel for several minutes before getting out. She looked different, tired. Her suit was wrinkled and her hair needed washing. The confidence she'd worn like armor for the past year seemed to have slipped. "I need to talk to you. Office is open." She followed me inside and sat in the customer chair. I poured coffee from the pot Tommy had started and offered her a cup. She shook her head. "I've been staying at Crystal's," she said. Crystal Fitch was her best friend from law school, a woman who'd never liked me and made no effort to hide it. "Okay. It's not working out. I need somewhere permanent. The duplex? I can't afford it alone. Frank wants both names off the lease or someone else to co-sign." I sipped my coffee and waited. "I was wondering if you'd consider staying on the lease, just until I figure something else out." "No. Zane, please. I don't have anywhere else to go." "What about Richie? Doesn't he flip houses? Surely he's got somewhere you can stay." She looked down at her hands. "That's complicated." "Complicated how?" "He's married." I set down my coffee cup carefully. "He's married. Separated. But his wife doesn't know about us yet. So you're the other woman, and he's still living with his wife. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. You threw away 18 years of marriage for a guy who's cheating on his wife with you. And now you want me to help you find somewhere to live, while you wait for him to maybe leave her. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You thought you were trading up, and it turns out you were trading down. Way down." Vara started crying, the ugly kind of tears that came with real despair. "I made a mistake. I know that now. But I don't know how to fix it." "You can't fix it. That's the point. Some things, once you break them, they stay broken." "So that's it? 18 years means nothing to you?" 18 years means everything to me. That's why I can't pretend this never happened. That's why I can't help you clean up the mess you made." She cried for a few more minutes while I finished my coffee. Finally, she wiped her eyes with a tissue from the box on my desk. "What am I supposed to do?" "Figure it out. You're a lawyer. You're smart. You're a free person, remember? Free people solve their own problems." After she left, I called Frank Kowalski and confirmed that my name was off the lease. Whatever happened to Vara and the duplex wasn't my problem anymore. Tommy arrived an hour later with donuts and gossip. "Saw your ex-wife leaving. She looked rough." "Not my ex-wife yet. Takes time to process the paperwork. But soon? Soon. Good. She never seemed right for you anyway." "Why's that?" "She looked at you like you were something stuck to her shoe. A man's wife shouldn't look at him that way." Tommy was 22 and had been dating the same girl since high school, but sometimes he understood things that took me years to figure out. "You're probably right. I know I'm right. My dad always said, 'Son, marry a woman who thinks you hung the moon even if you know you didn't.' Smart man, my dad." "What happened to him?" "Cancer 5 years ago. But he and Mom were happy for 37 years. That's something." I spent the rest of the day working on a transmission rebuild, letting the familiar rhythm of disassembly and diagnosis clear my head. By closing time, I felt centered again. That evening, I drove to the grocery store and bought real food for the first time in weeks. Steak, potatoes, vegetables, bread. I was going to cook dinner in my own kitchen, in my own house, and eat it in my own time. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway, but it was a welcoming darkness. The kind that meant home instead of emptiness. I was finally learning the difference. 3 weeks into my new life, I discovered that Vara hadn't been entirely honest about her situation. I learned this from Crystal Fitch, of all people, who showed up at my shop on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Crystal was everything Vara aspired to be: polished, successful, and completely self-centered. She drove a BMW and wore designer suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She'd never liked me, and I'd never pretended to like her. Zane. She stood in my office doorway like she was afraid the grease might jump off the walls and stain her clothes. Crystal, what brings you to my humble establishment? We need to talk. About? Vara. I gestured to the customer chair. She sat down carefully, as if the vinyl might be contaminated. She's been staying with me for 3 weeks, Crystal said. It needs to stop. Okay. Okay? That's all you have to say? It's your house. You decide who stays there. She's your wife. Soon-to-be ex-wife. And she's the one who decided our marriage was over, not me. Crystal crossed her legs and smoothed her skirt. She made a mistake. People make mistakes. Some mistakes you can fix, others you live with. You're being cruel. I'm being realistic. Vara chose to have an affair. She chose to end our marriage. She chose to move out. Those were all her decisions. Now she gets to live with the consequences. She's falling apart, Zane. She's drinking too much, crying all the time. She can barely function at work. That's unfortunate. How can you be so cold? I leaned back in my chair and studied Crystal's face. She was angry, but there was something else there. Something that looked almost like panic. Why do you care so much, Crystal? You never liked our marriage. You spent years telling Vara she could do better than me. I never said that. You didn't have to. It was written all over your face every time you looked at me. She shifted uncomfortably. This isn't about me. Isn't it? You and Vara have been friends for what, 15 years? You've been in her ear the whole time, telling her she deserves more. She should aim higher. She's settling for less than she's worth. Vara makes her own decisions. Does she? Or does she make the decisions you think she should make? Crystal stood up abruptly. I didn't come here to be psychoanalyzed by a mechanic. Then why did you come here? To ask you to take her back, to give her another chance. No. Just like that? Just like that. You're making a mistake, Zane. Vara is a good woman who made one bad choice. If you let her go, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Maybe. But that's my choice to make. After Crystal left, I sat in my office and thought about the conversation. Something about it bothered me, but I couldn't put my finger on what. That evening, I drove to Murphy's Tavern, the kind of blue-collar bar where the beer was cold and the conversation was honest. I'd been avoiding it since the separation because I didn't want to deal with questions and sympathy, but tonight I needed to be around people. The place was half full of familiar faces, guys from the plant, construction workers, a few women from the diner down the street. I ordered a beer and found an empty stool at the far end of the bar. Heard about you and Vara, said Mickey Torres, sliding onto the stool next to mine. Mickey ran a landscaping business and had done some work on the duplex a few years back. Sorry, man. Thanks. For what it's worth, I always thought you were too good for her. I raised an eyebrow. That's the opposite of what most people think. Most people are idiots. She had everything handed to her. Good job, nice husband, decent life. And she threw it away for what? Some loser who peaked in high school? You know Richie? Know of him. He's been sniffing around town for 6 months, talking big about development projects and investment opportunities. Mostly what he does is buy run-down houses with other people's money, slap some paint on them, and try to flip them for twice what they're worth. Any of it legitimate? Some, maybe. But I heard from a guy who knows a guy that Richie's got some debts. The kind that don't go away when you file bankruptcy. I filed that information away and changed the subject. Mickey and I talked about football and the weather until I finished my beer, then I drove home. The house was dark and quiet, the way I liked it. I made a sandwich and sat in my father's recliner, thinking about what Mickey had told me. If Richie was in financial trouble, That explained a lot. Vara had always been attracted to success, or at least the appearance of it. If she'd fallen for Richie's sales pitch about being a successful developer, she might not have looked too closely at the reality. My phone rang. Julie. How are you holding up? I'm fine. Dave said he saw you at Murphy's tonight. You never go to Murphy's. I went tonight. Zane, I'm worried about you. This whole situation, it's not like you to be so cold about it. What's that supposed to mean? You loved Vara, I know you did. And now you're acting like she never mattered at all. I was quiet for a moment, trying to figure out how to explain something I barely understood myself. I did love her, I said finally. For 18 years, I loved her more than anything. I worked 60-hour weeks to give her the life she wanted. I put off my own dreams to support hers. I turned myself inside out, trying to be the man she needed me to be. So what changed? I realized she never loved me back. Not really. She loved what I could give her, what I could do for her. But she never loved me. How can you say that? Because when she decided she wanted something else, she didn't even have the respect to talk to me about it. She just started cheating and waited for me to figure it out. That's not how you treat someone you love, Julie. That's how you treat someone you use. Julie was quiet for a long time. Maybe you're right, she said finally, but that doesn't mean you have to become someone you're not. Who says I'm becoming someone I'm not? Maybe this is who I always was, and I just forgot for a while. After we hung up, I sat in the dark and thought about that. Maybe Julie was right. Maybe I was changing into someone harder and less forgiving than I used to be. But maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe the old Zane had been too trusting, too willing to make excuses for people who didn't deserve them. The new Zane was learning to protect himself. And for the first time in years, that felt like progress. The divorce papers came back from Vara's lawyer on a Monday morning in November. She was contesting everything: the separation of assets, the timeline, even the grounds for divorce. Her lawyer wanted mediation, counseling, a cooling-off period. I called my own lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Hendricks, who specialized in family law. She's stalling, Patricia said, probably hoping you'll change your mind. I won't. Then we'll push back. Michigan's a no-fault state, and you've got clear documentation of the separation. She can contest all she wants, but eventually the court will grant the divorce. How long? 6 months, maybe 8 if she keeps fighting it. I hung up and went back to work. If Vara wanted to drag this out, that was her choice, but it wouldn't change the outcome. That afternoon, Tommy brought me interesting news along with a thermos of his girlfriend's homemade soup. You know that guy your wife was seeing, Richie Vance? What about him? My cousin works at the bank. Says Richie's been trying to get a loan extension on some properties he owns. Apparently, he's behind on payments. How far behind? Far enough that they're talking foreclosure. I stirred the soup and thought about that. If Richie was in serious financial trouble, it might explain why Vara had been so desperate to stay at Crystal's and why Crystal was pushing so hard for me to take Vara back. Anything else? Yeah. My cousin also said Richie's wife filed for divorce last week, cleaned out their joint accounts and moved back in with her parents. So Richie's marriage was officially over, but his financial problems were just beginning. That put Vara in an interesting position. She'd left a stable marriage for a man who was about to lose everything. Thanks for the intel. No problem, boss. I figure you should know what you're dealing with. That evening, I was working late in my garage when headlights swept across the driveway. A car door slammed and footsteps crunched on gravel. I looked up to see Richie Vance standing in my garage doorway. I'd seen him around town over the years, but never up close. He was shorter than I'd expected, with thinning hair and the soft look of a man who'd spent too many years drinking beer and making excuses. He wore a leather jacket that had seen better days and jeans that were trying too hard to look expensive. You're Zane. I'm Zane. You're the guy screwing my wife. He flinched slightly. We need to talk. No, we don't. Look, I know this is awkward. Awkward? I set down my wrench and turned to face him. You think this is awkward? You have an affair with my wife, help her destroy an 18-year marriage, and now you show up at my house to chat about it? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Vara said you two were having problems. She said you were separated. When did she say that? When we started seeing each other. And when was that? 6 months ago. 6 months ago, I was still sleeping in the same bed with her, still eating dinner with her every night, still thinking I had a wife who loved me. So either Vara lied to you, or you're lying to me. Richie looked down at his shoes. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe you didn't care enough to ask the right questions. Look, I didn't come here to fight with you. Then why did you come here? To ask you to take her back. I stared at him. You want me to take back the wife you've been sleeping with for 6 months. She doesn't belong with me. She belongs with you. Funny, 6 months ago you seemed to think she belonged with you. That was different. How? I thought I could give her what she wanted, but I can't. I'm in trouble, Zane, financial trouble. Vara deserves better than what I can offer her. So you used her for 6 months, and now that your money's running out, you want to send her back to me. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. You're a user, Richie. You used my wife, and now you're trying to use me to clean up your mess. She's falling apart. She's drinking. She's not eating. Crystal says she might lose her job. That's what happens when you make bad choices. Come on, man. She made a mistake. People deserve second chances. Some people do. Vara had 18 years of chances. She used them all up. Richie took a step closer. What if I told you it was my fault? What if I told you I pursued her, convinced her to leave you? I'd say you're lying. Vara's a grown woman who makes her own decisions. She chose to have an affair. She chose to end our marriage. Those were her choices, not yours. So that's it? You're just going to let her destroy herself? I'm going to let her live with the consequences of her actions. That's what adults do. Richie stood there for another minute, then turned and walked back to his car. I watched his taillights disappear down Oak Street, then went back to work. But I couldn't concentrate. Something about the conversation bothered me. Richie had seemed genuinely desperate, not just for himself, but for Vara. And his story about her telling him they were separated didn't ring true. I'd been married to Vara for 18 years. She was many things, ambitious, demanding, sometimes cold, but she wasn't a liar. At least, I'd never thought she was. The next morning, I called Patricia Hendricks. I need you to do some research on someone, I said. Richard Vance, also known as Richie. I want to know about his finances, his business dealings, anything public record. This is about your wife's affair partner? Maybe. I'm not sure yet. Zane, I have to advise you that investigating the other man isn't going to help your divorce case. Michigan doesn't consider adultery in property settlements. This isn't about the divorce. This is about something else. Okay, I'll see what I can find. She called me back 2 days later with a file full of interesting information. Richie Vance had been married twice before Vara came along. Both marriages had ended in divorce, both times with the wives claiming financial fraud. He'd been sued by contractors, investors, and former business partners. His real estate business was essentially a Ponzi scheme. He used money from new investors to pay off old debts while skimming profits for himself. He's been operating this way for years, Patricia said, always one step ahead of bankruptcy, always looking for new sources of capital. What kind of capital? The kind that comes with access to professional credit and steady income. The kind that comes with a lawyer wife who doesn't ask too many questions about where the money goes. I hung up and sat in my office, staring at the file. Vara hadn't just had an affair. She'd been targeted by a professional con man who specialized in seducing women with money and status. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it explained it. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt something other than anger when I thought about my wife. I felt sorry for her. I spent the weekend thinking about what Patricia had told me. By Monday morning, I'd made a decision that surprised even me. I was going to see Vara, not to reconcile. That ship had sailed and sunk, but to give her information she needed to protect herself. Whatever she'd done to our marriage, she didn't deserve to be financially destroyed by a con man. I found her at Crystal's house, a pristine colonial in the nicest part of town. Crystal answered the door wearing yoga pants and an expression of pure disdain. "What do you want?" "To talk to Vara. She doesn't want to see you. Let her tell me that herself." Crystal started to close the door, but Vara appeared behind her. She looked terrible. Thin, pale, with dark circles under her eyes. She was wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt, and her hair hung limp around her shoulders. "It's okay, Crystal. I'll talk to him." We sat on Crystal's back patio, a perfectly manicured space with expensive outdoor furniture and a view of the golf course. Vara wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and waited for me to speak. "I know about Richie's financial situation." She didn't look surprised. "How much do you know?" "Enough. The failed businesses, the lawsuits, the pattern of targeting women with money and professional status. He told me he loved me. Maybe he did. Maybe he still does. But that doesn't change what he is." Vara pulled the blanket tighter. "I figured it out 2 weeks ago. Found some papers in his car. Court documents, notices from creditors. When I confronted him about it, he said he was going to tell me everything after his divorce was final." "Do you believe him?" "I want to. But I'm not stupid, Zane. I know what this looks like." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. I gave him money. A lot of money. My savings, my retirement account, even some from the firm's client trust fund." I felt my stomach drop. "How much from the trust fund?" $15,000. I was going to pay it back when he closed on a property deal. "Vara, that's embezzlement. You could lose your license. You could go to jail." "I know." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I know." We sat in silence for a few minutes. A golf cart puttered by on the course beyond Crystal's fence, and somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower hummed. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked finally. "Because I don't have anyone else to tell. Crystal thinks I should just pretend it never happened and hope no one notices. Richie says he'll pay it back, but his creditors are circling. And you're the only person who's ever really known me. I thought I knew you. Turns out I was wrong about a lot of things." "No, you weren't. You knew exactly who I was. That's why this is so hard." "What do you mean?" "You knew I was ambitious. You knew I wanted more than what we had. You knew I was capable of making terrible decisions when I thought I saw a shortcut to something better. And you loved me anyway. For 18 years. For 18 years. And I threw it away for a fantasy." I looked at her sitting there in her borrowed blanket on her best friend's patio, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not love. That was gone. Probably forever. But something like compassion. "What do you need from me, Vara?" "Nothing. I just wanted you to know that you were right about everything. About me, about us, about what I was doing. I wanted you to know that I know. That doesn't fix anything. I know. But it's the truth, and I owe you that much." Crystal appeared in the doorway with a pitcher of iced tea and a disapproving expression. "Everything okay out here?" "Fine," Vara said. Zane was just leaving. I stood up and looked down at my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, sitting in her blanket like a refugee from her own life. "For what it's worth," I said, "I hope you figure out a way to fix the trust fund problem." "Why?" "Because despite everything, I don't want to see you in jail." I walked back through Crystal's perfect house and out to my truck. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of Vara in the rearview mirror, still sitting on the patio, still wrapped in her blanket. That evening, I called Patricia Hendricks. "I need to know about something called restitution in embezzlement cases," I said. Hypothetically. Hypothetically, if someone took money from a client trust fund and paid it back before anyone noticed, they might avoid criminal charges. But they'd still face disciplinary action from the state bar. How much disciplinary action? Suspension, maybe disbarment. Depends on the amount and the circumstances. And if they didn't pay it back? Jail time. Definitely disbarment. Career over. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and thought about what Vara had told me. $15,000 wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was more than I had lying around. It was also more than Richie was likely to come up with, given his financial situation. I thought about 18 years of marriage. I thought about the woman I'd loved and the woman she'd become. I thought about justice and mercy and the difference between punishment and revenge. Then I did something that would have surprised the man I'd been 6 months ago. I wrote a check. The next morning, I drove to Brennan and Associates and walked into the reception area like I belonged there. The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly styled hair and a suspicious expression, looked up from her computer. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Zane Merrinor. I'm her husband. I'll see if she's available." Vara appeared a few minutes later, looking confused and slightly panicked. "Zane, what are you doing here?" I handed her an envelope. "Open it." Inside was a cashier's check for $15,000 made out to Brennan and Associates Client Trust Fund. "I can't take this." "You're not taking it. You're borrowing it. You can pay me back when you get on your feet." "Why?" "Because I don't want to be married to someone in jail. It would complicate the divorce." She almost smiled at that. "That's the only reason?" "That's the only reason I'm willing to admit to. I'll pay you back. Every penny. I know you will." I turned to leave, then stopped. "Vara?" "Yeah?" "Don't ever contact me again unless it's through lawyers or about paying back this money. We're done talking." "I understand. And stay away from Richie Vance. He's poison." "I know." I walked out of the law office and back to my truck. As I drove away, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace, not happiness. That would come later, if it came at all. But peace. The knowledge that I'd done the right thing, even if it wasn't the easy thing. The marriage was over. The divorce would be final in a few months. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I was okay with that. I was free. 6 months later, the divorce was final. Vara kept the duplex and found a way to make the rent work. She also found a new job at a smaller firm in Grand Rapids, a 40-minute drive that gave her a fresh start away from the gossip and whispers of South Shore. Richie Vance lost his house and his business to creditors and moved to Florida, where he presumably found new marks to con. His ex-wife got everything in their divorce, which wasn't much, but was more than he deserved. Crystal Fitch and I never spoke again, which suited both of us fine. Vara paid me back the $15,000 in monthly installments over 2 years. She never missed a payment, and she never tried to contact me except to send the checks and brief notes about her payment schedule. I kept the house on Oak Street and slowly turned it into something that felt like home. I painted the living room, updated the kitchen appliances, and planted a garden in the backyard. Small projects that I did for myself, in my own time, the way I wanted them done. Tommy got married to his high school girlfriend in a ceremony at the community center. I was his best man, and his father-in-law offered me a beer and some advice afterward. "Marriage is like rebuilding an engine," he said. "You got to have the right parts, the right tools, and the patience to do it right. But most important, you got to want the same thing the other person wants. What if you don't? Then you're better off walking away before you strip the threads." I thought about that a lot over the following months. Vara and I had wanted different things, been heading in different directions for longer than either of us had been willing to admit. The affair was just the symptom, not the disease. Maybe if we'd been honest with each other earlier, we could have ended things with less pain and bitterness. Maybe we could have been friends, or at least civil strangers. But maybe some endings are supposed to be messy. Maybe some bridges are supposed to burn. I never remarried. I dated occasionally, went out with a teacher from the elementary school and a nurse from the hospital, but nothing serious developed. I was content with my work, my house, my quiet life. Julie worried that I was becoming a hermit, but I wasn't hiding from the world. I was just learning to be comfortable in my own company, to find satisfaction in simple things like a job well done and a peaceful evening at home. Some people are meant to be part of a pair, others are meant to stand alone. It took me 40 years to figure out which kind I was, but once I did, everything else became clearer. The shop prospered. Word got around that I was honest and fair, and customers started driving from other towns to have their cars fixed. I hired another mechanic, then bought the building next door and expanded. Success felt different when it was mine alone, when I didn't have to justify it or share it or worry about whether it was impressive enough for someone else's standards. On quiet evenings, I sometimes thought about the man I'd been when I was married, eager to please, willing to compromise, always trying to be someone else's version of enough. That man hadn't been weak, exactly, but he'd been incomplete. The man I became after the divorce was harder but also more honest. He knew what he wanted and wasn't afraid to ask for it. He knew what he wouldn't tolerate and wasn't afraid to walk away from it. He was, finally and completely, free. And that, it turned out, was worth everything it had cost to become him.